We constantly hearing that such and such a person did this crime, as a result of which he was condemned to life in prison or hanging, and that is the punishment that he received. However, my friends, there are many awful punishments throughout human history that make the human soul shudder to think about them. We will discuss some of the worst punishments throughout history in this video.
Dear friends, crucifixion was a kind of execution in which the victim was nailed to a big wooden cross and hung there until he died. He would eventually become exhausted and suffocate to death. This is a painful death. Additionally, it had a significant impact on the audience, who were so psychologically terrified of it for the rest of their life that they never pondered breaking any laws. Between 300 and 400 BC, the Persians introduced the crucifixion, and it is possibly the most agonizing death that the human has ever invented. Since roughly 500 years ago, the Romans have been crucifying enemy troops, slaves, foreigners, and notably Christians as a form of punishment. Later, however, in the 4th century, Constantine I outlawed this penalty.
The saw that we now use to chop wood was once used to cut people. During the Roman Empire, sawn-off executions were a frequent practice in Europe. They have also been widely utilized in the Middle East and some regions of Asia. In the past, the individual who was to be punished was hung upside down while having his body sawed in half vertically. Despite the significant bleeding, the individual was hanging upside down, which allowed for continuing blood flow to the brain. This allowed for continued oxygenation of the brain tissue, which allowed the person to remain awake. He suffered, but neither fainted nor passed away instantly. He was believed to lose his sense even after being struck in the major blood vessels in his stomach, thus slicing the man in half vertically.
Between 570 and 554 BC, a Greek named Perillus, who lived in Athens, created the brazen bow. Due to its origin in Sicily, it was also known as the Sicilian bow. The tyrant Peleus, who ruled over Acragas in Sicily at the time, was in power. The brutal violence of Perillus was well known. Cannibalism, or the practice of eating other people, is one of his claimed horrors. According to story, Perillus was so vicious that he devoured newborns and young infants. The same oppressive king had fashioned this brazen bow. This instrument of death from Perillus to cause the agonizing death of people. Friends, this is a brazen bow, also known as Sicilian bull, a brass instrument that resembles a bull in both size and shape. As you can see on the screen, it only had one entrance.
The condemned individual was restrained, placed inside the bull on its stomach, and the door was sealed from the outside. Next, a fire was started underneath the vine. The individual within the brass bull was slowly burned to death by the heat of the fire as a result of the fire's burning, which caused the brass bull to heat up more and more. The Sicilian bull also contained devices that would translate the victim's screams into the bull's bells. The smoke produced by the victim's decomposition came out of the bull's nose. Another astounding fact is that the tyrant Phalaris put Perillus, the apparatus creator, inside it and set on fire.
However, Perillus was taken out of the bull's belly before he passed away. His life was not spared because Perillus had dismissed him from the expedition. Instead, he was killed by being hurled down a steep mountain after a while. However, there was a moment when this oppressive tyrant also served his lesson. When Telemachus overthrew Perillus' leadership in 554 BC, Perillus was also burned in the same Sicilian bull.
Rat torture, as you must have guessed from the name, is the practice of employing rat as a form of punishment. Friends, in the past, the person who was to be punished was positioned on his or her bare stomach or chest while holding a rat trap or a cage housing a sick or hungry rat. The cage was then heated from the outside, and if the fire became too hot, a desperate rat would try to escape by chewing his way out of the cage by biting into the unfortunate man's stomach. This means that the rat's relentless biting was that ultimately led to the person's death. The earliest recorded instance of rat torture was used in Europe in the 17th century.
Flaying is a slang term for skin removal. Humans were punished with a painful death penalty in this cruel punishment. Torture was applied on criminals, and a blade was used to gradually take the skin from his body. Now, depending on how much skin was taken off, the person would either pass away or live a life of equal physical and mental suffering. This is one of the earliest forms of punishment being used here. History states that similar sentence was also meted out in the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 911 BC. Later, this punishment was still meted out to criminals in other locations and at various times. This penalty was more frequently meted out to traders, particularly in medieval Europe.
It was a unique way to put someone to death throughout the history of penalties. A heated liquid such as water, oil, molten lead, wax, or alcohol was enclosed in the big vessel in which the condemned prisoner was kept. Being roasted alive must feel dreadful, as you can only imagine. When the individual was put inside the pot and heated with water or oil, the process was rendered worse. For instance, this person will experience greater discomfort as the water approaches its boiling point. The only way to instantly die under this punishment was if the liquid was already boiling. Thus, he would drown and die from burns, but aside from that, it would be a lengthy and painful process to death. One of the deadliest types of execution throughout the Middle Ages was boiling to death. Thousands of Christians were executed in a similar manner under the rule of the Roman Emperor.
The breaking wheel was yet another terrible means of execution. The prisoner was bound to a wheel which made up this extremely basic apparatus. A heavy stick was used to beat the victim's body, or more specifically his numerous organs, as the wheel was turned. Consequently, the violence and the wheel spinning caused his body bones to eventually fracture. Thus, this person's death was extremely painful. It is unclear when in history this string of penalty first appeared, but in Germany throughout the Middle Ages, this was primarily how criminals were punished. Peter Stump, a notorious historical serial killer who was also a German farmer, he received the same type of punishment when he was found guilty in Cologne, Germany in 1598.
Hope you enjoyed today's video.
That's it for today. Bye for now.